We bought this 107-year-old farm last year, and I wanted to share with you the transformation. It has been an incredible journey, and we're only partway there, but I thought it would be really fun to take you on the journey and show you the way that it is transforming both just and looks, but actually what it is transforming into what God's plan is for this place to become. So behind me here is what we are calling the event barn. So when we first bought this property, if you watched any of those early videos, this had no garage doors on it, and it was basically just an old shell of a building, and the roof was actually starting to leak, and we had to redo the roof first just so that we could save the structure of it over the winter months. But since then, we have been transforming this into a place, one, where we can do our workshops. So we have held 2 in-person workshops here this summer. We have our 3rd one coming up in September. And at first I thought we were just going to make it into a building. We were going to salvage it because it just needed a new roof. And I really wasn't sure what we were going to do in here. So we first started the transformation of it, just saving the building structurally, and then turning it into a place where we could do the in-person workshop. So we have done a growing a year's worth of food in-person workshop here. We also did our preserving workshop. So we also have visions of perhaps doing chicken butchering workshops here, kind of seeing what all different workshops people want to come and have hands-on learning in and offer those. So we knew that we needed to get power to it and we needed to get running water. So that was kind of our first main things. But then as we started doing all of that, we started having people asking about possibly doing weddings here and expressing interest in doing weddings, especially once we got the farmhouse up as a farm stay and people started booking it and coming here and spending weeks and weekends here. We actually had people who booked a stay just to come and spend the weekend and then asked if they could get married here. And it's really funny how God works, because I have to tell you, never in a million years would I have ever thought that I would be doing any type of wedding venue or involved in that industry or anything like that. But we started getting more and more interest and felt that that was a good route to go. So we started looking at this as not just an in-person workshop space, which it definitely is, but also how we could transform that into a place that would be pretty and for gatherings and that could house people in many different ways and options. And of course, as a venue for weddings, but perhaps bridal showers, we're gonna have our church picnic here, different things like that. And so we started looking at, okay, what do we have that we can use without having to buy more? Because putting the roof on was pretty expensive of its own, in addition to remodeling and restoring the farmhouse. So if you haven't seen that video, you can check out the before and after of the farmhouse and its restoration. So probably like 12 years ago, my husband was able to get a bunch of old tin from where he worked. They were tearing down some buildings and there was some old tin, and we brought it home. And it's funny because when we brought it home, we thought it would probably be, if we built a barn at our house or a shed or something like that, we would have roofing material. But God knew that that's not what it was going to be used for. We just didn't. And so my husband's idea was to take the tin, because wood, of course, is really expensive, even still right now, and to take the tin, and we were just going to do the bottom half of the walls at first. So after we got the electrical put in, we closed off the bottom walls and did almost like a wainscoting. Of course, it goes up a little bit higher, but using the tin. So that was great because it was something that we already had pretty much lying around. But then once we got that done and we were able to get the sink put in, there was a local auction house, which we were actually able to grab this sink. And then this is actually, it's on wheels. But again, it's a stainless steel. So these work really nice. So we can move this all around. We were able to get that. And this is actually the original fridge that was in the farmhouse that we took out when we were doing the restoration, but it works great as just having an extra fridge space to hold drinks or different things like that here. And so we just have that covered up. But once we got that in, then we started looking up, and it's funny, once you get one part in, then it makes you realize you're gonna kind of have to keep going. And so we got the tin in and had a couple people come and tour, but it kind of felt unfinished. And so we started thinking about, okay, what else can we have? What else do we have lying around that we could use to finish the top half of the walls on the inside of the building? And I think this may be one of my favorite parts that we've done so far on the entire property, including the farmhouse. So what you see on the upper half that goes all the way up to the ceiling on this back wall is this is hand split wood. So this wood we are guessing probably from the early 1900s. And where this came from was the inside wall of the falling down portion of the barn. And so it was very carefully done because one, you just can't get wood like this anymore. But two, there was some really, because it had been put in a barn. And so taking it down so that it didn't split was pretty tricky. And so we were able to get that all down, and we weren't even sure if there would be enough to go the whole expanse. So we started on this bottom part here, and we started right in the center. And the thought was, well, we'll start in the center and we'll go out evenly, and we'll get out as far as we can. And if we don't have enough to go all the way to the corners, then we can picture frame that in with more tin and just go up, and we'll just showcase just with whatever we have. Well, as it got going, we also decided to put in a window because it gets a little stuffy and dark in here during the summer months for a breeze. Plus, being able to look out at the cow pasture and the trees is really nice. But as we got going, we realized we had enough to do the whole bottom section, and there was still some left over. And so on the top part, we're like, well, let's just see the same thing. Start in the center and move our way out. And we had just enough to do this entire back wall with this beautiful old wood. So that was super exciting. We did not have enough, however, to do the side upper walls. And we knew that we needed those to match. So that was really the only new material that we had to buy in order to finish off the interior of this whole space. So we just got that done and finished about 2 weeks ago at the time of this recording. And so we got everything set up. We had some brides come and tour. And so we had everything set up in here with the tables and chairs from our last workshop. And then I went ahead and decorated it, which I have to say, I would have never anticipated that I would be doing floral arrangements and decorating, but it was kind of fun. And all of the flowers and all of the greenery and everything that you see here, we grew in the farmstead garden on the property this year. So that was also really exciting because originally I just grown the flowers because one, they're beautiful. They're excellent pollinators too, so we do have the vegetable garden down here. But God knew that we were going to be doing wedding venue tours, even though I had no idea. And so I'm sharing this with you because sometimes we have very set, defined plans. And sometimes things happen or evolve and we don't really even know where they're going. In fact, I had some moments, to be honest, a couple of weeks ago. I've been dealing with some health stuff that I haven't shared with you guys publicly yet, and I'll probably do a video on it, but I'm not quite ready to talk about it yet. And I was really doing some soul searching and looking and wondering, what is it I'm really supposed to be doing? And kind of having some moments, honestly, like, have we bitten off more than we can chew with this place? Because getting it up and going and rehabbing the pastures and the fence lines and managing it as a farm stay and having guests come and all of that, plus continuing with the renovations on it and having kind of one of those moments like, what if we've done all of this and then I don't book any weddings? How far are we going to go with this? And I had to have that moment where I just put it back in God's lap, which is where I should have left it all along. And I'm like, I am just going to do the next thing. So whatever it is that you want me to do and you have been leading, I'm going to have faith that you are going to show. And all I have to do is just be obedient. Because honestly, I never thought that we would even own a farm, that I would be doing any of this in this capacity, even, a year and a half ago. And so you might not be looking at a farm and creating a wedding venue from it, but I'm sure that there's things in your life where you're unsure of how they're going to go. And maybe you're worrying about them, or it's causing some anxiety, or you're just questioning, did we make the right choice? Did I do the right thing? is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? And so I encourage you is to just hand it over and just focus on the thing that you can do right now. We don't always have to see the exact full picture and know completely where things are going. There's something about just moving in the faith and in the moment and trusting that God has you and what He wants for your life, He will bring if you are seeking Him diligently and seeking His will and making sure that you're actually listening for His still small voice. So I wanted to share this with you, and I also want to take you over and show you the medicinal herb garden and how much that has grown in just the past few months since we put it in this spring. Here is our medicinal herb garden, which has multi-purposes. One, it's just actually really pretty. When you're doing a medicinal herb garden, a lot of the flowers benefit both ways or have dual purposes. So here we have the yarrow and the feverfew and the lavender, and all of these, especially the yarrow and the feverfew, are beautiful in cut flower bouquets, but they're also really powerful medicine as well. So I wanted, if we wanted to do bouquets, of course, then of course I could cut these. They serve our purpose for the medicinal teaching, but also for harvesting. So kind of my long-term dream, though it's not what's happened this year, I've come to learn that one can only do so much in a certain amount of time, even if I do try to push those boundaries. And what my goal is to have a place where people who live locally can come and actually harvest and get herbs for medicinal use, because there is no place around in our general vicinity where I can go and just buy herbs without having to order them online or travel a really far distance. And it's really a passion of mine, and hopefully yours, maybe you'll watch this and this will inspire you, is that we've got more small in-person places where we can go and get things within our communities without having to drive vast distances or only be able to get them online and depending upon the mail. So that's kind of my long-term goal, is to create just for a local space where people can come and get medicinal herbs. But for right now, it's serving its purpose, as it does look really pretty, and these are growing up so much, and next year they'll be even larger because I have a lot of smaller perennials behind me here that will really fill in and actually blossom next year. So if brides want to get married outside, and then they've got some of these beautiful different backdrops to pick from, but it's also our herbal teaching garden. So September 23rd, Dr. Patrick Jones and myself are doing an in-person workshop here, and we will be using the herbs from this garden and doing some walkthroughs along with the additional training, so people will actually get to come and have some hands-on learning. A few other things, though, about this is, of course, sharing with those of you who are just watching this on the video, and that is doing some of your planning when you are putting in things, and that's kind of that long-term goal and vision, and that's even with your harvest. So as we are approaching fall, right now we're still in the end part of summer, and that is knowing the parts that you're harvesting. So this is echinacea, and this is new. It's such a baby small echinacea. It hasn't even thrown up any flowers yet, and it probably won't this year. But for echinacea, you can harvest and use the flowers and the leaves, but the stronger medicinal part is actually in the root. But when you are growing your roots on your medicinal plants, you can't harvest most of them until the plant, for most plants, are at least 2 to 3 years old, simply because the root's just not going to be big enough to even bother. And so these were just put in, and then I've got the same echinacea. I bought older, more mature plants, so they were already a year old, and these are the ones here that are already throwing up blossoms and flowers. So next year, I'll be able to harvest the root from the echinacea, but I want to make sure, because they do have to be 2 to 3 years old, that I'm always staggering them, so every year I've got them coming in. So next year, when I decide to harvest this root, I'll want to be putting a plant in right behind it, but then I'll have that plant that the following year will be big enough. So if you're doing medicinal plants where you are harvesting the herbs, the herbs of course, but the root, you want to kind of think about some of that stagger planting so that you're never without, and also the time of year. So fall is when a plant's natural life cycle, most plants, even perennials, once fall comes and you get those frosts, the plant dies back. And so it begins to take all of its energy and it stores it in its root system so that one, the root has all of that energy in it so that in spring when conditions are right for it to grow again, then it takes all of that stored energy from the root and then it puts it into growing new leaves and new blossoms, etc. So it's really key that you know how that plant's life cycle is and what part of the plant you're harvesting so that you're harvesting it when it has its strongest medicinal properties. So in the case of roots, that is going to be in the fall after that first killing frost when the plant has put all of its energy into the root. You're going to want to harvest that root then. Now, if you miss the fall, you can do it at the very early part of spring, right before the plant would begin to send up its shoots and start to grow. But fall is ideal just so that you don't miss that window. And I prefer to do it in fall rather in spring. I feel like spring is a much busier time for me and I don't tend to get to things out as much in spring or kind of miss that window of when it starts to throw up its shoots and making sure I'm getting the root when it's in dormancy. So for the root, some of the medicinal plants we're growing for the root part is of course echinacea. I've also got valerian back here. And so I've got my valerian root that's growing. It's kind of tucked behind the yarrow right now. And then I've got licorice. So I have my licorice right here, a couple little licorice plants. And of course you can see these are really tiny little babies here. And then I've also got my marshmallow. So I've got marshmallow back here and I'll definitely be harvesting those roots. And so you can see this is a little bit more established. These were actually planted at the same time. But this one has really taken off, started to throw up some blossoms. I've got a lot more flowers here. And this is a marshmallow as well, but it has not grown as much as this one has. So, which is fine. It's still growing. It's not dying. But it's been very interesting to see these marshmallow plants were all planted at the same time, but this one is a lot more vigorous and growing. And then one of my other root plants that we've got growing over here, which I'm so excited because I just have some little baby blossoms and they're really pretty. And this is the Chinese skullcap. And so this will be the root that I'll be harvesting, but again, not until these are at least a couple of years old before I go with the root. So my goal was to make sure that I had enough planted that I would be able to harvest 1 year and then put back in and then let the other one grow and that forth. So making sure that you've got that planning out, both the time of year harvest-wise for the best medicinal properties, but as well as that long range so that you are never without these medicinal crops as you start growing them. Now, if you want to learn more about using herbs medicinally, especially for the cold and flu season, I am doing a free digital online training, but it is going to be live. I would love to have you join me September 27th, and that link to register for that will be beneath this video as well. So I thought it would be fun. One, I wanted to show you just the growth and transformation in just one season as we put in the medicinal herb garden, but I also thought it would be fun to show you the flower and vegetable garden that we have down here, just because, I don't know, I love to see other people's gardens. I love to walk in gardens, but I also like to see other people's as well. So this we put in, this was just field. It was actually just lawn. There was not any livestock on here. And so this was just field. So we put these 2 beds in. We did add some compost and then some mulch here, but that's all we did. And so these 2 gardens, you can see we've got the archways here. So we've got quite a bit of tomatoes growing. We've got some cucumbers. The beans are really at the end, and I'm just letting these go to seed. In fact, these are almost ready to just harvest and go ahead and shell out for our seed bean. And I've got a video talking about growing and doing seed saving and when you're growing your beans for seed, those different stages, so you can check that out. So these, I'm just going to go ahead and let finish off and go to seed. And then I do have tucked inside there some Brussels sprouts that will be a fall crop down here. So we're really trying to kind of maximize the square footage of the garden space that we have down here. And this was really fun. I tried a whole bunch of different varieties of sunflowers, and I love this one. It's this ruby red. I think it's so pretty. They're of course much smaller than your typical large sunflowers, and I'm not really I'm growing these for the prettiness. I'm not growing them for the sunflower seeds because, as you can tell, they're gonna be really small. They're not like the big head ones. And of course we've got our zucchini. I think I'm gonna let that go just another day. You know, it's funny I say that because I'm going to come down here tomorrow. Anybody who's grown zucchini knows you look at it one day and you're like, no, it's just a little too small. I'm going to come get it tomorrow. I'm going to come down here tomorrow and it's going to be the size of a baseball bat. But still gonna let that one go. Just a little bit too small. And then this is another variety of sunflower. See, isn't that one fun? It's just kind of that little mauve pink, and then it goes out into the yellow. And these definitely have a bigger, that's gonna be a bigger seed head. So I'm gonna save some of these for, of course, just for resowing and for flowers, but for also the sunflowers. And then of course, I've got some of just the larger, what you would kind of, your more typical sunflower. This part was fun. We just threw out a couple different mixes of wildflowers, but it's actually one of my favorite spots. It's just so dense, and there's always so many little honeybees and worker bees. It's been so fun watching this as pollinator, and then just to see what pops up, because some of them, I don't even know what varieties they are. It was just a big mix of all different ones. And these, I have to say, these are one of my favorites. And a lot of these I know, like this is a bachelor button. I've got cosmos in here. I actually have to look up. I'm not sure what this one is, but I really enjoyed this one. So it's kind of like almost like a surprise. Like it was like a gift packet of seeds. Like I'm not sure what I'm gonna get. So it's kind of fun just watching those bloom and come up. And then here we put dahlias on this end. And so dahlias are one of my absolute favorites. This is only my 3rd year growing dahlias. And Beth Crowley from Crowley House Farm was so sweet and kind. She sent me a bunch of her favorite dahlia varieties. And I am loving this one. You guys, doesn't it? It almost looks like sherbet, like a sunset, or like the orange sherbet ice cream. And so this one I just love. I think what I like about the dahlias is how they change as they open and mature. Because when it first starts, it's more like kind of the orange pink, and then you get some of the yellow. And then this one, it's obviously much more further along in its bloom cycle. It's almost all the way yellow now, with just like a little bit of a pale kind of peachy color in the center. But I love watching how they change in color and just all the different sizes. Like these are more like the little pom-pom ones. I love them because they're like in the little circle. I think they're fun. But then these big dinner plate dahlias. Oh, anyways, I kind of have a dahlia obsession now. So don't be surprised if next year, I kind of think I should just double the dahlia patch. We'll see. But that's kind of my goal. And I do have to say, on the dahlias, I did a test last year at our home garden. I have dahlias in too. And I did a test because I just can't help myself. They always say you're supposed to dig up your dahlia tubers because they'll rot in the ground. And here in the Pacific Northwest, we do get a lot of rain over the winter months. And I'm like, well, let's just put that to the test. So I left them all in the ground, and only 2 came back. And I got lucky because it was 2 of my favorites. But I now know if I want dahlias next year without having to buy more tubers, then I'm going to have to pull these bad boys up in the fall and put them in storage and then plant them back in the ground, because some of those gardening things that experienced gardeners tell you, there's a reason that they tell you to do them. I tend to be one of those people who always am like, oh, really? Well, let's just find out. I'd probably be a lot more happier if I didn't test everything, but there you have it. I did test it, and in most cases, you probably should lift your dahlia tubers up out of the ground if you want them to come back the following year. If you want to learn more about using herbs and natural medicine, especially for cold and flu season, make sure that you grab your seat and register for the free herbal training this September 27th.